the rubber hits the road here, and how do people start feeling this, and what is the administration's response at that point when they really start to get the pressure?
Well, one thing that Jorge was like talking with these farmers about that really wasn't part of the story he was telling, but was his question is like, all these prices are going to go up. The prices of the goods that you grow in Montana and these Midwestern states, they will have to go up because, so, you know, we're talking on a micro level as well as a macro level that he was sort of realizing as he was reporting out this piece about like what the ramifications of that are. I have a great question from the chat from Chris, who asks, will Trump go off script tonight? And our colleague Peter from the control room throws in an addendum that, how can you tell when he's doing it? That one I think we can answer. The second half we can answer. The first one we can't. But so this is supposed to be such a scripted speech. I mean, traditionally, teams work on this for, gosh, how long, James?
Usually they start, you like in a traditional White House, you start in December, you sort of, before Christmas, you work on kind of decide core themes that you want to address. Obviously, Trump got inaugurated January 20th. Typically, the State of the Union is earlier, you know, so, but typically you would kind of like have a meeting, and then the speechwriters would work over Christmas and kind of put together a first draft, and then farm stuff out to the different cabinet departments. Where, you know, if you're talking about housing policy, you have HUD weigh in, and then the president practices it several times. They'll go into the theater at the White House and set up the teleprompters and have you deliver it. And, you know, typically, with the exception of once in the 90s, the teleprompter completely broke, which is something we've all had to deal with when Bill Clinton was giving the State of the Union, and the prompter just stopped working. And so he had like a printout and was like flipping through, but he actually joked about it. He said, the teleprompter's out, so I'm trying to find where I was in the speech. With Trump, though, I was talking to a presidential speechwriter, not for Trump, but for another Republican, who was marveling that, like, you know, when Trump is on the prompter, in one little tell is that when there's any kind of number that's in the prompter, Trump will pause and like offer a comment on the number. So it'll be like 29%. I'll be like, wow, 29%. You know, like and he was like, without fail, Trump always does that when he's actually reading off prompter. And ever since he told me that, I've noticed it really is true. That is what happens.
That's a very interesting tell. Yeah, that's something to watch out for. I also know you have to think of what a president, and specifically this president, feels moving into this speech. So this has been a few weeks of him doubling down on all the actions of his administration. He's feeling very confident. He has been saying he has approval rating numbers that aren't matching those that we've reported and polled at the Washington Post, as well as others. So he's going into this probably very confident. And when he's confident, he often will ad lib or go off the cuff a little bit more than usual. And in covering some of his State of the Union addresses from his first time in office, I do remember he had a few where he just stuck right to the teleprompter, and you could tell it, and his voice was very monotone, and he was just following through. And then there were other times where he did ad lib, felt more comfortable. So I'm thinking, given what we've seen from him in the last month, that may be a way to judge what he will do tonight. So it may be a mix, really, of how he was when he accepted the nomination over the summer at the RNC, where he stuck to the script, because we did get the script early, but you could tell within a few paragraphs he started just doing his own thing, and it ended up being a very, very long speech. So Trump, and I looked this up, he has an average of his State of the Union speeches, an average of an hour and 20 minutes. So if we get to that hour and 19 minutes and he's not wrapping it up, we know that's confident Trump. We know that's off the cuff Trump, and we'll see how long.
You get someone in his ear to say rap.
Yeah.
Right. No one's ever done that to you, James. Never. So we're also looking at an image of the White House now. So we've gone from seeing inside at Statuary Hall to the exterior of the White House, and that is the motorcade that will take President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, down Pennsylvania Avenue to Capitol Hill. Such a huge night of tradition. Obviously, J.D. Vance will be there, the Vice President, and the Second Lady, Usha Vance, and there they are. President Trump, Melania Trump.
So again, body language. He does look like he's ready to give this speech.
Clenched fists.
Right, clenched
That's
fists.
the fighter Trump.
Right.
He looks, I don't know, locked in. I mean, he looks kind of frustrated. He looks a little angry.
Well, it is late. It is late.
That might just be serious, Jake.
Yeah,
that's
very,
true.
very serious.
He likes looking like a tough guy. That's his official portrait this time is him sort of like very, it's almost like his mugshot, just straight ahead. Whereas the first one, in his first official photo, he smiled and he like complained to aides all the time. He wished he hadn't smiled because he looked weak. So you're right. That probably is what he's going for.
Speaking of sort of trying to portray this combative, tough guy image, if Democrats do respond tonight with any sort of heckling or response, you can bet that Donald Trump will respond in kind. And that may be a perfect opening for him. I mean, that's one of the liabilities Democrats have too. If they respond or sort of act out, as Republicans have done in some past years, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, it may actually help President Trump out sort of in that moment, because he can be combative. J.D. Vance can be very combative. And in the end, they tend to sort of win that street fight. Whoever's on the podium wins the street fight. President Biden had one of the most powerful moments of last year, really, the most effective moments, where he was mixing it up with the Republicans who were hollering at him during his State of the Union on everything from saving, was it Medicare, to dealing with the border. And he was able to mix it up and have this dynamic, punchy repartee that Democrats were really hungry to see.
Yeah. The kids call it clapping back, I think. It's
They do, James. They do.
It will be interesting to see. I think there's Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries who are thinking about the entire conference, and like Chuck Schumer's thinking about Democrats writ large. They're thinking about their frontline members, and then you have other individual Democrats who are thinking about how are they going to get booked on MSNBC tomorrow. How are they going to have a moment? And they're the ones, who will do what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert did last year, yelling and screaming and hollering. And ultimately that does give fodder to Trump to sort of, it's a foil that is helpful for who's ever up there. It's interesting. The four of us rewatched in preparation for tonight's speech, the 2020 State of the Union, which was right before COVID. And I think one of the indelible, if not the indelible image from that speech is Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech at the end. And what I confess I had forgotten was that Pelosi did that at the end of the speech because Trump snubbed her at the start of the speech. She reached out her hand to shake it. He didn't shake it. And so then Pelosi was responding to that, but that's not what people remember. People just remember Pelosi ripping up the speech. So you do have to be careful. You're doing some kind of symbolic thing that is a reaction to something else. Almost never is it a good idea to fight fire with fire.
Well, and it's our colleague Paul Kane had an interview with Pelosi going into tonight's speech talking about because Democrats have been all over the place trying to figure out what their strategy is, right? Some have been trying, Chris Murphy's a good example, right? Trying to really just go after every single thing. Don't pull back on anything. You've had other Democrats say we've got to really pick our spots of how we respond. And I do think that's an interesting dynamic tonight. It's interesting because Pelosi, in that interview with our colleague Paul Kane, said that Democrats should be restrained tonight, said that Democrats should basically wait for him to talk third rail, which is Medicaid cuts. And what he says about that, be ready to react to that. And she analogized it to Democrats in 2005, when Bush won re-election. Republicans controlled both chambers, and Bush was working to, in his words, reform Social Security. Democrats successfully pushed back because it never happened, right? And also, even if you hearken back to 2017, Republicans controlled both chambers then, and Democrats, and they had bigger majorities in the House. The
big issue that year, a very similar safety net was Obamacare and the ACA.
Correct. Yes.
Republican at this point in 2017, Trump very much wanted to get rid of. This was before the John McCain thumbs down, and they really thought that they would get rid of the ACA.
Yeah.
Now, President Trump has promised not to touch Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but there's a name we have not mentioned tonight, which is shocking because we're 35 minutes into our broadcast, and I don't think any of us has said the name Elon Musk. And he will be here tonight. He will not have a place of great prominence because that's reserved for people who actually, or like Supreme Court justices or Joint Chiefs chairmen and stuff like that. But Elon Musk will be here tonight, and he has been critical of Social Security and called it a Ponzi scheme. I mean, he is someone who thinks that some of these programs that are so stitched in the American fabric should be ripped apart. So that
I mean, the challenge if you're a Democrat is like Trump's not going to go up there and be like, "You got me. I'm going to slash Medicaid." Right? Trump's going to be like,
no,
"I am
saying
protecting
they're looking for fraud and abuse."
Exactly.
And right,
we're getting rid of the scam,
Yeah.
and so then it's it's up to Democrats, and maybe Elisa Slotkin, the Democratic senator who's responding, will have to explain like, no, they are coming after Medicaid, but it is hard if you're a Democrat because again, leadership doesn't want members being like, you're lying about Medicaid, you're cutting Medicaid. I mean, the other thing is that even you talk about Bush and Social Security and Pelosi, and I mean, ultimately Social Security overhaul failed in 2005 because of Republicans blocking Bush. And like Mike Johnson last week got this budget resolution through and he had to make a lot of promises to a lot of people. And honestly, some of the promises he made were kind of contradictory, and those chickens are going to come home to roost. He has frontline members like Don Bacon from Omaha District Kamala Harris carried, who were saying, I will not vote for anything that's going to cut Medicaid. And then he has the hardliner Freedom Caucus who are like, we need to cut Medicaid. And then he has this whole other group that just wants to cut taxes as much as possible. And so he's made all these promises to all these people, and how do you can't possibly keep them all.
And they'll also talk about work requirements. Langford was on one of the Sunday shows this past weekend. James Langford, Republican senator from Oklahoma, saying we want work requirements for Medicaid, which polls a little higher because folks will say, oh, well, yeah, you should work, right? Even if you did what Republicans are saying, that's $100 billion, maybe $150 billion. But they need to get that number because the tax cuts, they're going to need to make up that money somewhere. So that's why they're talking Medicaid. They also can't do Medicare and Social Security through reconciliation, which is how they're going to get this through, if they get it through. But I think that to your point on the chickens are going to come home to roost, it's also the math doesn't math at a certain point, right? So they're going to have to figure that out here.
And also I will add that that's just the House. Let's look at the dynamics of the Senate. The budget deal is going to also have to pass another chamber. Yeah. And right now you have Senate Republicans. They've already passed their framework and said that we are going to do this in a two-bucket way, where first we're going to handle funding the government. They added more money for the border and defense. And then they said, we'll work on the other stuff that Trump wants in the big, beautiful bill later. Well, they're not too happy with that package that the House Republicans are trying to get through. So while Johnson is trying to maneuver his factions in the House Republican caucus with only a 3-seat majority, meanwhile, on the other side of the Capitol, you have Senate Republicans who are not happy with the House Republicans. So how this is all going to be figured out in about 7 to 10 days, no one truly knows. That's real. No one on the Hill yet knows how this is going to happen.
And this all brings us back both to tariffs that we were discussing, because they think they're going to make up a bunch of revenue from tariffs, but also Elon Musk, because the Trump administration is putting Elon Musk and Doge in and inflating the amount of the cuts that they've done so far, and they're using that to say.
I'm going to throw out some random things that I'm going to ask you guys if we're going to hear about them tonight or not. Do you think we're going to hear about crypto?
Yes.
Because that's another way that Trump is trying to I don't even say this, establish a Fort Knox of crypto, but that would of course take money, taxpayer dollars, to fund and create. Right. So crypto. Okay. What do you think about? Oh, and here we see the
Senate,
and there's the Vice President J.D. Vance and
John Thune.
Majority Leader. I'm still getting used to saying Majority Leader John Thune. And there's the rest of leadership there from Republicans. So the Senate's come over, and our team has told us that Elon Musk actually left the White House even before President Trump. So he's already made his way over to here. So the lawmakers who sit on the edge here have worked hard to get this close seat. They have to stake it out, Rhonda.
So, yeah, I mean,
very true.
Democrat
this is an
right
interesting
there.
dynamic right here.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. Rhonda can tell us why. She's from Ohio.
They're both from the same state, of course, but Captor.
People don't necessarily know that. Yeah,
that is true. They're both from Ohio. Captor is the longest-serving woman in the House. I don't know what they were talking about. I need to work on my lip.
The Buckeyes.
There was a famous episode during I guess last year during the UAW auto strike where J.D. Vance actually went to the picket line, and Marcy Kaptur said, this your first time at a picket line? And JD Vance awkwardly and sheepishly was like, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
She kind of scolded him. Yeah.
She also represents an area of Ohio that has a lot of Ukrainian refugees. She is a part of the Ukrainian Congressional Caucus, feels very passionately about funding the Ukrainians' effort of defense. So I'm wondering if maybe that is what she brought up to him.
And she represents a Trump district. She represents the district Trump carried.
She represents, if you look at the northern part of Ohio, she represents a huge swath of the areas near the lake, Cleveland, and stretching on to the west of the state. Has a huge district, and you're right, she usually is in a very tight re-election race every 2 years.
And as Vance is walking down the aisle, we haven't really talked about Ukraine either. Dick Durbin, who's the number 2 Democratic leader, you can see he's wearing a Ukraine pin there, the yellow and blue. It'll be interesting to see how many Democrats wear Ukraine colors. Usually foreign policy ends up coming up toward the end of the speech. Obviously, Ukraine has been top of mind in the news, but so it'll be interesting to see if Trump deals with it earlier. Go ahead.
Yeah, he will be dealing with it in a few minutes as he makes his way to the Hill, because there is a huge protest happening. There was when I was there. When I got there in the afternoon, it just had a handful of people. And when I left, the Capitol Police were out. They had a barricade. It grew to a large number of people with Ukrainian flags. They were yelling, "We support Ukraine. Elon Musk must go." But it was primarily a pro-Ukrainian protest. And I imagine it is likely still there. It was very peaceful, but there were a lot of people, and as I was leaving, more people were coming. So I'm wondering, as his motorcade comes up to the Capitol, if he's going to be seeing that scene.
We just saw the Joint Chiefs, notably absent General C.Q. Brown, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, fired by Trump 2 weeks ago in a Friday night purge. Interestingly, Trump also appointed him to be the head of the Air Force when he was president the first time. And there's, when you see Chip Roy, he's one of the hardliners. That's the ball guy, former Ted Cruz chief of staff. He's one of the people who is kind of always a thorn in the side of leadership. Interestingly, a lot of those former Congressional Freedom Caucus far-right people are now working in the Legislative Affairs Department for the Trump White House. So it's sort of the people who've always been a pain in leadership, and now they work for Trump, trying to get Republicans to vote for their agenda.
And for the folks at home, next week and the week after, when they're trying to figure out how to fund the government, well, next week, really, Chip Roy is one of those folks you're going to want to watch. He's a Republican who has not usually stood for some of the revisions and drafts of budget deals. So we'll see which way he goes.
So the speech is going to kick off in about 20 minutes or so, and we're going to stick around throughout the speech. We'll talk through it, hopefully not over it, but try to decode some of what President Trump is saying, talk about the audience reactions, give some of our reporting and information about some of the stats and numbers that the president might throw out. And I want to circle back to that question that Chris had asked in the chat about when will we know, and will we know if President Trump goes off script? And there are some tells, like you said, the number thing. But at the Republican convention, when Rhonda and James and I were watching in person, there's just like a noticeable tone shift that you start to get. And sure enough, we looked over and the teleprompter was like wiggling and then just stopped because the president, then candidate, had really gone off. And how many words off did
so there was just a hot mic moment, and Mike Johnson realized it and brought the mic down, and they were making small talk, but JD Vance said, "I think this is actually going to be a pretty good speech." And then Mike Johnson said, "Well, it's going to be a lot easier than sitting through Biden." And then they kind of laughed, and then Johnson saw that the microphone was up and pulled it down for those watching. Sorry.
No, please. Definitely. Give us
But you can see there's the kind of the confidence. JD's wearing his red tie. He kind of has the body language. I've never seen Tom Cotton smile so much. He's normally a very non-smiling kind of person, and he's seems to be kind of happy. There's Tom Homan, the border czar. With I think a woman who's a guest who her husband was killed by a drunk driver who was an undocumented immigrant. Josh Hawley, but you see
Republicans are excited.
They're having a good time. They're feeling good. And to Rhonda's point, there's like the polls show that Donald Trump's at like 43% approval rating, but they feel good. They feel like things are kind of working in their favor. And
I do want to point out part of this, and this is for every party, the optics are they know that we're all watching. And so for J.D. Vance to have the jacket slung open and have this confident air, that's all part of what they're trying to show. And it does come on the heels of the Oval Office spat with President Zelensky on Friday, where Vice President Vance and President Trump were very happy to try to out-tough him and literally show him the door. And so we're coming on the heels of this moment where they are trying to make themselves look tough, both domestically and abroad.
It is worth noting that despite some of the blowback that the administration has gotten for some of its things so far, what they're doing is overwhelmingly popular for the most part with Republicans, with their base. And this is sort of the moment, obviously pending what happens in the midterms, but this is where political capital is at its highest. So if they're going to do some of the stuff that they want to do here legislatively, this is the moment to make that happen. And
I just want to point out, we see former Speaker Pelosi there, still a member of Congress, and Steny Hoyer, both wearing colors representing Ukraine. And I almost called her Speaker Emeritus.
Speaker Emeritus.
Pelosi. But she's a walker right now because she broke her hip, but she's got that beautiful scarf draped over it in the Ukrainian colors. And Congressman Hoyer the same with that tie, really trying to make a statement with that.
And I remember covering the State of the Union when the year the war broke out, and I remember members went to the steps and they were dressed in, blue and yellow, right?
Yellow, yep.
And they were showing their support. I actually went back to the first time Zelensky came. Well, he didn't come to Capitol. The first address he gave was virtual. And I remember talking to a lawmaker who was saying, when they heard Zelensky, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. And to see this shift where you have seen Republicans who had once called for a no-fly zone before, now saying, no funds, they're going to follow Trump. Trump and Vance did the right thing last Friday when so many other people found that very shocking. It really shows you the evolution of the support for Ukraine when it was bipartisan, no question, to what's happening now.
Really led by President Trump and J.D. Vance. I mean, the Republicans are following.
Trump has moved the public opinion among Republicans. He really has. Mike Johnson, who we see up there, he was willing to risk his speakership to get $60 billion for Ukraine last year. He had a special kind of staycation. He and his wife were in a suite at the Pendry Hotel on the waterfront. And it was the night before the vote, and Johnson told his wife, I don't think I'm going to survive, but it's worth it to save Ukraine. And now here he is saying Zelensky needs to resign if, or make it right after offending Trump during that contentious meeting. And in many ways, J.D. Vance was the instigator of that. So you kind of see the old guard and the new guard of the Republican Party standing there. I mean, both, I guess, J.D. Vance was actually born in the 80s. He's only 40. Mike Johnson was born in the mid-70s. I mean, it is quite a contrast to the previous generation.
Mm-hmm.
And even how Trump and his officials were talking about it, right? When Russia invaded, Trump called it a Holocaust, like 2 weeks in on Fox News. So the way that even Trump himself was talking about it, the way that his Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was talking about it, right? The way that his National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, former member of Congress from Florida, was talking about it. All these folks have shifted here, some as recently as within the last few weeks, months here, some over the last year. But there has been, and this really is a moment, I think, again, we even heard the British Prime Minister sort of say this over the weekend, that we're at sort of a crossroads moment in history. And I think what Trump says only days after that Oval Office thing is really kind of the transition point here, right?
So we're getting some excerpts from the speech, so we're getting those sent to us here. And there will be conversation about some of the very important topics that we've been talking about, including Ukraine and international policy. But some of what we're hearing is really going to be similar to what we heard, I think, at President Trump's inauguration. Kind of a vibe from that. While everyone looks over these excerpts, you can see there the family of President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, the Kushners, as well as Tiffany Trump, and you see there Don Jr. You can also see Usha Vance there in the crowd. So much of what we're looking at tonight are reactions, are the cutaways, and we'll be telling you more tonight about the people who are here as guests. And it is so interesting to think about who Democrats have brought as guests and who Republicans have brought as guests. Rhonda, a lot of Democrats have brought as guests federal workers who have lost their jobs all over the country in all kinds of different locations. Also people who've been impacted by DOGE cuts because of services that they receive.
That's exactly right. And that is pretty much the theme. Democrats want to sort of show the faces of people they believe have been harmed by Trump's actions over the last few weeks. That includes federal workers who have been let go from their jobs. I'll also note that Chuck Schumer, who is the minority leader in the Senate, his guests will include family members of hostages who were killed by Hamas. So that's another theme. That's reoccurring from last year as well. There will also be veterans who have been let go from the VA. That's been a huge issue that Democrats have been trying to amplify as well. There are people who represent folks who rely on Medicaid for their insurance, their children's insurance. I know some of the guests will represent that as well. But the overall theme that I've been seeing from the announcements from Democrats is they want to put a face, especially on the DOGE cuts.
The joint session will come to order.
I mean, as I'm looking at these excerpts here, this is really.
The chair appoints as members of the committee on the part of the House.
This feels like a real. I mean, it's a continuation of the inauguration.
The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
He's shifting. He's trying to shift the U.S. and kind of the post-World War II infrastructure that's been in place on economics, foreign policy, domestic policy, and how they're kind of reshaping the federal government. And even as you go through this, some of the things he's talking about, I mean, even when he's going to say now for the first time in modern American history, more Americans believe our country's heading in the right direction than the wrong direction. That's not what recent polling shows, right? And that's that's the second excerpt that they've released here.
So what's most striking to me reading the excerpts that the White House has shared is that he attacks Joe Biden by name.
Yeah.
Which he took a shot at
blames
Biden
him
for egg prices.
When do presidents do that? I mean, when you have secured the presidency, how uncommon is it for a sitting president to reference back not someone who's they're facing in an upcoming election, but someone who's not even on the political scene anymore?
Barack Obama tried in 2009, 2010, not in the State of the Union, but he would talk about George W. Bush, and he would say, Republicans put us in the ditch, and now we're out of the ditch and we're starting to drive, and they want the car keys back, and that he would riff like that, but he wouldn't say George W. Bush, and so he's going to.
Some final questions if you have them before this thing begins in a couple of minutes, and I'll just go until the very last minute here.
The President of the Senate, at the direction of that body, appoints the following senators as members of.
So it looks like we are beginning. So what I'm going to do
the President of the United States into the House chamber
is go full screen on this. I'm sorry, full volume on this right here.
Mr. Barrasso, the Senator from Arkansas, Mr. Cotton, the Senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Lankford, the Senator from West Virginia, Mrs. Capito, the Senator from South Carolina, Mr. Scott, the Senator from New York, Mr. Schumer, the Senator from Illinois, Mr. Durbin.
Who is giving the Democratic response? That's Alyssa Slotkin. So I will continue to broadcast the entire thing. So once we have the Democratic response, stick around so that we can hear that.
The members of the escort committee will exit the chamber through the lobby doors.
And yes, don't worry, as soon as the speech begins, we will go full screen. How I'm going to handle this, because I am not here to give a platform to abject lies, is if I hear something that's untrue, without being too bothersome to those who are watching, I'll pop in, give a fact check of what he said, and get right back to it. This is not about hearing me, but at the same time, I'm not into just giving a platform for somebody to be able to spew lies unchecked. I think we have we have seen legacy media operate in a way that has been far too conducive to Trump being able to lie with impunity for too long. And so, again, I'll try to make this as inoffensive as possible in terms of my intrusions, but at the same time, I think it is important that we do focus on the truth when we have the ability to tell it.
My wife loves this gray suit. I hate it, but I wear it because she'll see me on TV. I'm a blazer, man.
And we're about 5-10 minutes away from the president entering the chamber and beginning his speech. Jasmine Wright, Jason Dick, we've been watching this, chatting amongst ourselves. Is there anything that we can share?
So I'm getting the question, what's stopping Trump from fixing the midterms? Who keeps an eye on this? Importantly, elections are run not by the federal government, but by the states. And so each state is responsible for administering their own elections. So that is the good news. And I think that makes a lot of sense because otherwise the party in power would have a vested interest, if they are corrupt enough, which we are seeing, they're corrupt enough in preventing any opposing party from being able to win the win their state's elections. So that's the good news about the midterms. And look, we've got smart folks who are imminently focused on this stuff. I mean, I host a voting rights series with Mark Elias. Disabuse yourself of the notion that he and lawyers and legislators and members of Congress and senators are not focused on all of this stuff right now. So we have a whole lot of people who are very in tune and on top of the fact that Republicans will use every tool at their disposal to try and prevent free and fair elections from taking place, but that in the states we do have a lot of bulwarks to be able to prevent against this kind of corruption and abuse. So, look, if anything pops up, I can assure you that I will know about it, that I will cover it, and that we will do everything at our disposal to be able to stop it and shine a spotlight on it. I think Republicans rely on being able to do this stuff kind of under the cloak of darkness, and that gives them the cover that they need. That is the last thing that I intend to allow them to do. So for those who are watching right now, if you want to support my efforts and what I do, the best way to do that is to subscribe to this channel on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, wherever you get your news. That is the best way to support what I do and those efforts.
We did see Anthony Kennedy, too.
Retired Justice Anthony Kennedy.
All right, and we seem to be just a minute or two away from this speech beginning in earnest here. Trump has not yet entered the chamber. To those who are tuning in, thank you. Thanks for supporting independent media. I know that there's a lot of different places that you can that you'd be able to watch, that you'd be able to get your coverage for the joint address, and I really appreciate you supporting independent media. I explained a little earlier today that the reason that I'm in a suit again and broadcasting from the Capitol is that we organized a group of 50 content creators to come to the Capitol to speak to elected officials in the Democratic Party, senators, members of Congress, and to build relationships between these folks. A lot of people have been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks now, we should figure out how to do what they're doing on the right. We should figure out how to build up our independent media space. That's exactly what we're doing right now. A lot of you have heard me talk about Chorus. That is what Chorus is. So we got a group of 50 content creators here. We're building relationships between these elected officials who recognize the importance of not just heaping all of their validation and time and energy and resources onto legacy media and sitting down for interviews on MSNBC and CNN, but instead are actually focusing on content creators who are reaching a broader swath of people, and the people that they're reaching, frankly, are a lot more persuadable, a lot more independent than the folks who you're going to get by just going on MSNBC one more time after your third, fourth, fifth hit that week. And so this is what I've been focused on since the day the election ended. Started getting on the phone and figuring out how we can try to achieve parity with what the right has done because they have a huge independent media space. And so it's so important that we build up what we have on the left, and we're here doing the thing and getting all of these independent media folks, all of these content creators, all of these influencers in front of our elected officials so that we can get the message out to as many people as humanly possible about the reality of this administration, what the consequences of his actions are, what the price of everyday goods is going to be, what it means if the U.S. abandons democracy, abandons NATO, and starts aligning itself with the Putins and Xi's and Kim Jong-uns of the world. And so we're trying to walk the walk right now instead of just talking the talk. So glad to be here. If you see other content creators who you follow doing content with elected officials, engage with it. Give them some positive reinforcement and feedback and let them know that like this is what we should be doing, embracing independent media, embracing digital media, and really trying to fight back against the onslaught that we're contending with from the right. All right, for those who are just joining in, we are moments away now, beginning in earnest. Trump has not yet entered the chamber, but you can see every member of Congress, every senator is in there right now. All of the Democrats, or a good number of the Democrats, have chosen to bring as their guests impacted federal workers who've been fired as the result of Trump's and Elon's efforts to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And these are people who were working to mitigate the impacts of wildfires in California. These are people who clean up our national parks. These are people who are researching cancer, cures for cancer. These are people who are working in education. These are people who are overseeing the distribution of healthcare funds. These are people who've worked in the Social Security Administration. These are people who are veterans, who work at the VA. And so a lot of these people who Elon casts off as government bloat are regular, hardworking Americans who, by the way, are taking these jobs at salaries that are far less than they would make in the private sector. So I get that it's the popular thing in the Republican Party to do by claiming that these people don't deserve their paychecks, but in large part, they are working in these positions and choosing not to take more money if they just worked in the private sector versus working and serving the American people more broadly. One more note for folks who are watching right now on this stream, if you want to join the Discord, I have pinned the link. And mods have pinned the link in the chat. So if you'd like to join the Discord, we've got a great community of more than 10,000 people right now. So jump in. We're launching AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, on Fridays. And it's a great way to really connect and build up this community at a time when we really need it most. So please, if you're not yet a member of the Discord, go ahead and click the invite link, and you can become a member. Kind of in this soft launch period while we have our first 10,000 here. It looks like Pete Hegseth is walking in, fresh off his time renaming military bases for Confederate officials and doing the real hard work of overseeing our military. Melania Trump has entered the chamber, and it looks like we are just probably moments away from this speech beginning. I guess the over-under when it comes to Trump being able to speak is somewhere around 3.5 hours. So the real prize will be who sticks with us until the bitter end of this thing. Marco Rubio, who has proven to be Donald Trump's bowl of jello, willing to bend as easily as the wind blows with whatever Trump wants. This is somebody who was overtly pro-democracy, pro-Ukraine, pro-NATO, who is who is now perfectly content to just attack Zelensky because Trump got the signal from his handler in the Kremlin, and now everybody has to turn on a dime. And Marco Rubio is proving himself just as pliable as Trump had hoped. For those people who are saying I'm not watching this for 3.5 hours, I can promise you that this will not go on for 3.5 hours. I'm 98% sure that this will not go on for 3.5 hours. If I had to guess, I would probably say somewhere in the ballpark of 45 minutes to an hour and 15. That's what my guess would be. But, you know, that and $10 will get you a foot long at Subway, so I'm not sure. Let me know in the chat what you think the word most repeated in this speech is going to be. I did ask Senator Schiff, Adam Schiff, what he thought the word that we're going to... I asked him, if we were to do a drinking game for the word that Donald Trump is going to be repeating most, and you wanted to get as drunk as humanly possible, what word would you bet on? I'll tell you after you all give your answers in the chat, but I'm curious to see what people think. I'm getting great. A lot of people said great. Best, great. Oh, man, we live in hell. World War III, huge. Huge. Nobody has ever seen. That's a good one. Bigly, I'm getting a lot too. Deal. And winning. Yeah. So the one Adam Schiff said was great. Billions and billions. Believe me. That's another good one. Yeah. It's a sad commentary on the world we live in right now. Very, because the man doesn't know enough adjectives. Well, alas. For those just tuning in, we are moments away now. The cabinet just came in, Melania Trump just came in, and so what we should expect next is Trump himself to come in and to begin this speech. Again, this is the presidential address to a joint session of Congress. The likes of which we've never seen. wet from the standpoint of water. Here's another one that a lot of people are saying is Biden, and that's because there are certainly issues right now, but as we all know, Trump isn't going to take responsibility for any of them, and so he'll be perfectly content to cast all the blame for issues that he is presiding over right now onto his predecessor, because he only knows how to take credit for victories and diffuse responsibility for everything else. I'm hearing from folks that the Discord link, the Discord link it looks to be working perfectly. So if you're not yet a member of the Discord, that is pinned in the top of the chat. Go ahead and click that link and jump into the Discord. We've built a great community of folks, and we're doing AMAs, we're doing voice chats. There's a lot of different channels to talk on politics or non-politics. So go ahead and jump into the Discord. There's an invite link there that should work for everybody. And again, for those who are just tuning in, we are moments away. It was supposed to start at 9, but probably just running a few minutes late because Trump wants to get as many eyeballs on him as possible. So that's where we are right now. In the meantime, while we wait, if you want to throw some last questions into the chat, we can talk about those. Do I think he's crazy enough to announce leaving NATO tonight? Actually, it would be against the law to unilaterally depart from NATO. It would require an act of Congress. So Trump can announce whatever he wants, and God knows he will try. But the reality is that that he doesn't have the ability to unilaterally exit the U.S. from NATO.
United States.
All right, so as you can see, Trump is now entering the chamber. I'm going to go full volume on what's happening right here. As I mentioned before, if he tells a lie, I'm perfectly content to come in and fact check. I am not in the business of allowing somebody to just spread lies with impunity, so perfectly content to jump in. I will do it as inobtrusively as possible, so don't worry about that. I'll make sure that you can hear the speech for yourself, but if there's something that's worth fact checking, I'll do it. One more note, if you're not yet subscribed or following, please support me on my channels. We've seen the extent to which this administration is willing to go after its opponents, and so being able to help, being able to allow me to reach folks wherever I'm reaching you, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, or if you follow on Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever it is, TikTok, Instagram. If you're able to support me just by following, that will make sure that I have enough of a voice to be able to reach out to folks and let them know what's going on as we as we recognize more and more how important independent media is. So if you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe, and I appreciate the support.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. Thank you very much. Speaker Johnson, Vice President Vance, the First Lady of the United States.
Weird, I thought that was Elon.
members of the United States Congress, thank you very much. And to my fellow citizens, America is back.
Stock market is in correction territory right now as the result of his policies, but
6 weeks ago, I stood beneath the dome of this Capitol and proclaimed the dawn of the golden age of America. From that moment on, it has been nothing but swift and unrelenting action to usher in the greatest and most successful era in the history of our country. We have accomplished more in 43 days than most administrations accomplished in 4 years or 8 years, and we are just getting started. I return to this chamber tonight to report that America's momentum is back, our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging bigger and better than ever before. The American dream is unstoppable, and our country is on the verge of a comeback, the likes of which the world has never witnessed and perhaps will never witness again. There's never been anything like it.
So we have a lot of platitudes in store tonight.
Of November 5th was a mandate like has not been seen in many decades. We won all 7 swing states, giving us an electoral college victory of 312 votes. We won the popular vote by big numbers and won counties in our country.
Our first heckle of the evening.
And won counties in our country, 2,700 to 525.
So
on a map that reads almost completely red for Republican. Now, for the first time in modern history, more Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction. In fact, it's an astonishing record, 27-point swing, the most ever. Likewise, small business optimism saw its single largest one-month gain ever recorded, a 41-point jump.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green,
You
take
know
your
that this
seat.
is making Trump
Take
so
your seat, sir.
salty.
Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber. Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House. Mr. President, you continue.
Thank you. Over the past 6 weeks, I have signed nearly 100 executive orders and taken more than 400 executive actions, a record to restore common sense, safety, optimism, and wealth all across our wonderful land. The people elected me to do the job, and I'm doing it.
People elected him under the pretense that he would lower prices. Prices are going up. Worth remembering.
In fact, it has been stated by many that the first month of our presidency, it's our presidency, is the most successful in the history of our nation.
Oh my God.
By many.
The stock market is tanking, in correction territory right now. The cost of eggs is double what it was when it was apparently disqualifying.
What makes it even more impressive is that, do you know who number 2 is? George Washington. How about that? How about that? I don't know about that list, but we'll take it. Within hours of taking the oath of office, I declared a national emergency on our southern border, and I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country. And what a job they've done. As a result, illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever.
Yes, inflation was down, but the cost of everything else was up because Trump decided to engage in a trade war. I haven't even seen eggs in my supermarket.
They heard my words and they chose not to come. Much easier that way. In comparison, under Joe Biden, the worst president in American history, there were hundreds of thousands of illegal crossings a month, and virtually all of them, including murderers, drug dealers, gang members, and people from mental institutions and insane asylums, were released into our country. Who would want to do that? This is my 5th such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me, and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what.
But he didn't, because in fact, he cut funding to people who are finding the cures to diseases.
And it just shouldn't be this way.
And far from locking up all the criminals, he let 1,600 insurrectionists go onto the streets where they would then commit more crimes like domestic violence and sexual assault. So what he's saying doesn't actually comport with reality. That's why Democrats don't applaud for him.
So Democrats sitting before me, for just this one night, why not join us in celebrating so many incredible wins for America? For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
Yeah, his budget instructs his own party to cut Medicaid and food stamps. I don't think these people, for the good of America, are going to stand up and clap for him.
Every day, my administration is fighting to deliver the change America needs to bring a future that America deserves, and we're doing it. This is a time for big dreams and bold action. Upon taking office, I imposed an immediate freeze on all federal hiring, a freeze on all new federal regulations, and a freeze on all foreign aid. I terminated the ridiculous Green New Scam. I withdrew from the unfair Paris Climate Accord, which was costing us trillions of dollars that other countries were not paying. I withdrew from the corrupt World Health Organization. And I also
Absolute
withdrew
circus.
from the anti-American UN Human Rights Council.
Listen, I withdrew from the Human Rights Council.
We ended all of Biden's environmental restrictions that were making our country far less safe and totally unaffordable. And importantly, we ended the last administration's insane electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto workers and companies from economic destruction. To unshackle our economy, I have directed that for every one new regulation, 10 old regulations must be eliminated, just like I did in my very successful first term. And in that first term, we set records on ending unnecessary rules and regulations like no other president had done before. We ordered all federal workers to return to the office. They will either show up for work in person or be removed from their job.
The irony of this guy, who is on the golf course more than the Oval Office, telling people that they have to show up for work.
And we've ended weaponized government where, as an example, a sitting president is allowed to viciously prosecute his political opponent, like me. How did that work out? Not too good. Not too good. And I have stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back.
Trump's U.S. attorney is sending letters of inquiry to Democratic members of Congress and senators who are critical of Trump.
English, the official language of the United States of America. I renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America.
I'm sure there were tens of people asking for that. Tens and tens.
And likewise, I renamed, for a great president, William McKinley, Mount McKinley again. Beautiful Alaska. We love Alaska. We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. And our country will be woke no longer.
That's right. We won't have woke stuff like Medicaid and food stamps and...
I believe that whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or an air traffic controller, you should be hired and promoted based on skill and competence, not race or gender. Very important. You should be hired based on merit. And the Supreme Court, in a brave and very powerful decision, has allowed us to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have removed the poison of critical race theory from our public schools, and I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.